Okay, now let's see if this mic works. Testing, testing. 1, 2. Okay, there we go. Oh, wow. So the time counter has us at about 13 minutes. So we've got a little bit of a late start here. Sorry about that, guys. Was messing around with the settings here. And all of a sudden I realized I was using the wrong web browser. So the web browser is now running off of my current one, which now I'm getting a picture, thank goodness. Okay, so we are back for another week. And another episode of the Kerbal Space Program, Minimalist Space Program, where, oh, 1 second. Yes, and in answer to your question there, Freak, yes, I was using Internet Explorer previously. Apparently it's the default Internet Explorer on my computer, so I switched it over to Google Chrome, and everything seems to be working hunky-dory now. Yeah, let's see if I can turn up the voice thing a little bit here. Testing, testing. 1, 2. Test, 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 test. Okay. So, brought the mic up a little bit there. I think you guys had some concern about the mic being a little bit low. How does that sound? Okay, so here we go. We're in another episode of Kerbal Space Program, Minimalist Space Program, where we try to settle the stars. Well, not so much as try, but do. Where we venture forth to settle the stars using less parts and using smaller parts and lighter vehicles. Also, keep in mind, guys, everyone that's in chat there, there's about a 45-second delay, which is pretty much the norm for YouTube. I imagine if I was live streaming this off of Twitch, you guys would get a quicker response. However, that's YouTube for you. But all in all, I do like YouTube a little bit more than Twitch because of the network capabilities that it has. So here we go. So we are currently in the VAB. Oh, Geesfer? I think it's Geesfer. Yeah, sorry about that. Didn't mean to blare out your speakers there. Okay, so here we go. So here in the VAB, we are preparing to send up our next object into orbit. Now, the curious thing about running a minimalist space program is that you can't really cheat space. And by cheat space, I mean you can't build gigantic 2.5 meter vehicles or 3.75 meter vehicles and off of a single launch head straight to Jupiter and start your own colony with, 20 some odd Kerbals. Everything has to happen in baby steps in the minimalist space program, and that's not just by design. That's because of the handicap we're playing with, and that you can't really do a whole lot off the bat with 1.25 meter parts. But that's the beauty of it and the challenge. So what we have here is a space station that we will be sending into orbit. I just realized that we sent up a Kerbal into orbit, and he didn't have a way to come back down to Kerbal. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be launching our first in a series of space stations, and this is the KRV station. What this is the Kerbal Return Vehicle Station, and following the course of minimalism, we want to make sure that the stations that we send into orbit are all specialized. Remember, we can't build everything space stations. If we build an everything space station, all of a sudden your part count is going to balloon. So in order, neat trick to preserving minimalism and part counts is to build stations, several stations, each that are specialized in their own specific skill. This KRV station is going to be the station that's going to be at the lowest orbit around Kerbin. And what it's going to do is it's going to provide 4 pods. As you can see, there are 4 pods here that allow Kerbals the capability to return back to Kerbin. Okay. As you can see, it's fairly rudimentary, and this station itself actually is, I believe, 32 parts. So we managed to keep part counts pretty low for a self-contained station with 4 pods. So we're going to go ahead and send this one into orbit now. So let's go ahead and load and head on to the launch pad. Okay, so I just realized our mic wasn't on. There we go. I've been talking for like a good minute, and I realized, oh my gosh, they can't hear me. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to get ready to head on into orbit. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch the icon. Call this the KRV station. Throttle up, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and launch. Here we go, going into space. So what we're going to be doing with this station is we're going to send this guy into really low Kerbal orbit. We're going to put this at a stable orbit at around 85 kilometers. Let's see, just wanted to say, KSP Minimalist, that you got all those bugs and whatnot sorted out. Yes, I'm glad too. Actually, the bugs weren't originating last week. The reason why we didn't have a live stream last week was due to some issues, not specifically with the computer, but with the internet connection as a whole. The entire internet infrastructure that serves my general area. Due to sometimes in the summer when the optic cables start to heat up, especially under the streets or the buried cable lines, they have a tendency to fluctuate and wreak havoc on internet connections. So that was the case last week. Fortunately, things seem to have stabilized a little bit more, so we're all good. Okay, so we're getting ready to dump our first set of engines. Looks like we're holding steady at about 45 kilometers, so we're going to get ready to do our turn in a bit. And first stage, jettison. Okay, so we're doing good. Now what's neat about this KRV station is this allows me to build other spacecraft with the ability to go into space, to dock with other space stations, and generally have the capability to do things without having to add extra parachute parts or parts needed for re-entry back to Kerbal. This station indirectly allows me to build other spacecraft with less parts, specifically manned spacecraft. Okay, so we are getting close to reaching the 10-kilometer mark. So here we go, and going into our gravity turn, turning over to 45 degrees. Okay, looking good. As you can see, we got a little bit of a wobble going on. Those outside engines, these guys right here, they're only attached via the radial decouplers. They're not really attached via struts, which makes them a little bit wobbly too. And part of the reason why I don't attach struts to these outside engines is because when we detach the radial decouplers, I want to be able to have the repulsive force of these radial decouplers push these engines away. If you have struts attached to them, what will happen is when the struts will negate the repulsive forces of these radial decouplers. Instead, these engines won't fly away, but rather they'll just be where they are and slip away due to gravity. And if you start building larger complex rockets, that can be a little bit of a risk hazard because it could end up smashing into various parts of your rocket as you jettison those parts. Okay, so we're doing pretty good right now. We are almost at 800 meters per second. Now remember, we got to hit that magic mark at about roughly 14 to 1500 meters per second in order to reach suborbit. Okay, and we are almost done with our next stage. And holding steady at altitude of 20 kilometers. And stage away. See how the repulsive forces just push those tanks away? That is really cool. That allows me to save part count so I don't have to add separatrons to the outboard engines. Okay, so we are having a little bit of an issue here trying to gain speed. So I'm going to lift up my nose a little bit. I may have angled this rocket a little bit too steeply, but that's okay. Now what's interesting about these vehicles is that I have a tendency to, when I do minimalism designs, I have a tendency to add just enough fuel and just enough part count so that vehicles are not only barely functional, but that they can just barely reach orbit. And that's kind of the case here too. We should have maybe a little bit of fuel left over by the time we manage to stabilize our orbit. However, we're going to be awfully close. Let's see. Geezer says, sunrise. It was worth staying awake just for the stream. Yeah, I think I caught earlier in your conversation that it's 4 a.m. in Great Britain. Wow. So it must be Sunday over there. Right now, it is, we're coming at about 9 o'clock here. So on a Saturday. But we're far from sunrise over here. Okay, so we just passed 1 kilometer a second. You know, I didn't know that the struts harm the force of decouplers. Yeah, they certainly do. I had to learn that one the hard way. Yeah, those struts, for whatever reason, the way that they're programmed, those struts like to hang on at the very last second. And for some reason, the way that they're programmed is that when the item that they're attached to is jettisoned, the decoupler jettisons, and then the strut still calculates the grappling physics behind holding that part to the vehicle just at the last second after the decouple. And then when the strut lets go afterwards, that physics calculation it did to negate the force of the decoupling is still in place. And so, you know, you kind of have just a... I just said a bunch of stuff that even I'm not sure I understand what I just said. But in any case, yes, struts do hinder the decoupling forces of radial decouplers and even standard decouplers too. Okay, so we're looking pretty good. We're approaching 1,500 meters per second. So, oh boy, so this one's going to be awfully close. We still need to keep going. So chances are we're going to maybe hit Miko at about maybe 1,700 meters per second, which may seem a little bit odd for some people who play this game off of 2.5 meter parts or or standard rocket designs, because usually if we have a good angle and a good trajectory, we hit MECO at about roughly 1,300 meters per second. But because these engines here attached to this vehicle are just enough to get this vehicle into suborbit, we're going to be hitting a bit of a shallow trajectory here. Okay, so we are at 1882 kilometers at the apoapsis. I'm going to push us a little bit further, and let's hit us up at about 83 kilometers. Now remember, ultimately we want to hit 85 meters, 85 kilometers as the circularized orbit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop our vehicle's nose, and drop that bad boy down ever so slowly. Okay, here we are. Now what I want to do is, even though we're in MECO, I want to start up burning again. And big reason behind that is, I know in most cases people make their set up their maneuver nodes around the apoapse like this, and then they'll go ahead and start setting up their maneuver node, and then as they approach that blue marker, they'll go ahead and start burning. However, by the time they reach that blue marker, see this speed indicator here? You notice how the speed is going down? They would have lost efficiency in their delta V because they're starting to burn at a lower speed. Here, we start burning immediately, like maybe roughly 30 seconds after MECO, so we can get ourselves reoriented so that we can keep burning and maintain that speed and keep it increasing. Ultimately, you really don't want to decrease too much speed because you got to burn more delta V to make up for it. So we're going to start up our burn again, and we're going to keep close watch at the apoapsis. Oops, and we're going to drop our nose below the horizon so that we can keep that apoapsis as close to 84 kilometers as possible. Okay, here we go, and oops, actually, oh my goodness, we are out of fuel. So we're going to jettison, and let's start out our other engine. Okay, so I may have spoken too soon. We may not have enough fuel to get this KRV into orbit, but we're going to see in just a little bit. Here we go. So remember, we need to hit that magic speed of roughly 2,300 to 2,400 meters per second in order to circularize our orbit. Hopefully, we have enough liquid fuel to do that. We are, oops, let's go and drop ourselves down here. We're approaching that 85 kilometer mark pretty quickly. Okay, so, So previous times I've done this, I've managed to get this thing in the orbit, but it looks like I'm not going to be able to do it this time. Yeah, but let's see if we can do this. Cross your fingers. Okay, so we are approaching 1850 meters per second. Come on, buddy, you can do this. Okay, and we are at half fuel on the last stage. Oh boy, if we do make it, this is going to be really, really close. Okay, remember that part where I said that it's good to start burning immediately after MECO, so that you don't lose too much delta V as you're approaching the apoapse? Well, my talking and explaining about that whole spiel while we were in MECO has lost us some valuable delta V, and we may not have enough delta V to recover that. Okay, so let's see how close we can get this before we run completely out of fuel. Come on, come on, come on. Can do this. Okay, so we have just gone completely out of fuel. Well, that's just great. Trust me, though, we have just enough fuel to get this thing in orbit. However, because I screwed things up, apparently, we don't this time around. Okay, so we are going to have to revert flight and head back into the vehicle assembly building. I'm going to have to add some extra engines or some extra fuel for the margins for error. Apparently, I didn't add enough margin for error on this vehicle, and it has just enough to get it into an 80-kilometer orbit. Well, hello, guys. Hello, new guys. Okay, so, we're going to be doing is, oh boy. Let's see about adding in. We're going to add some unnecessary part counts to this because we really need to get this thing into orbit. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some decouplers here. And these decouplers are going to be part of my master plan to get this KRV into orbit. Jebediah is in orbit right now with no way to get home. The poor guy. So we need to give him options to get home. So we need to get him this KRV station stat. Okay. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to just add in those tiny SRBs. So here we go. So tiny SRB. Okay. Now, unfortunately, what this is going to do also is that this is going to increase the weight on the outside engines. And since the outside engines have no struts, attaching them to the center line of the vehicle, this is gonna get a whole lot more wobbly. So cross your fingers, guys. Hopefully this will work. Okay, here we go. So we are prepped once again. So let's get rid of Bill here. This is going to be an unmanned mission for the first time around, and launch on the pad. Okay, so here we go. We are on the pad. Okay, so this thing's going to dangle a little bit since those radial decouplers are the only things holding these outboard engines. So we're going to open up our fuel resources and our statuses. Looks like we're at 81 parts total for this vehicle. However, the station itself is still, I believe, at a steady 32 parts, maybe 40 parts, so we're still okay. All right, so cross your fingers, guys. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch. Okay, hopefully this should give us enough margin for error during our launch in order to get this thing into a proper orbit. Okay. Everything looking good so far. Those SRBs are doing real good. Now we're off to a fairly slow start as a result of these SRBs are adding a lot of weight to the vehicle, but hopefully we'll do okay. My hope is that we can get this thing past 100 meters per second at least, which we seem to be doing okay before we jettison these SRBs. And looks like everything is staying stable so far. Nothing is dangling too much. Here we go, an SRB separation and mark, and now we go to our regular engines. Okay, now let's see if we can get ourselves past 150 meters per second. Should be doing okay. All right, let's get this KRV into orbit. Without this KRV, we don't have a manned space program. So we need to get this space station into orbit. Now, how I see it is we're probably going to have roughly about maybe 4 to 5 different types of space stations in orbit around Kerbal before we can make that next step to the Mun. Now, that's not to say that we're going to be we aren't going to be sending any objects at all to the Mun while we're stabilizing our manned presence around Kerbal. We certainly are. As a matter of fact, that's going to be our next mission, is to send a Kerbal over to probably the Mun or Minimalist, so that we can get organized with establishing a presence there. Once we establish a presence on the Minimalist and a presence on the Mun, then we're going to start setting up our travel to the other planets. And Duna, of course, will probably be our first one. And of course, we'll be doing this whole thing with just 1.25 meter parts or smaller. Okay. Alright, so we're coming to our first stage separation, and we're already at 10 kilometers. Awesome. And first stage separation mark, and we go into our gravity turn, or centrifugal turn, depending on whether or not you're a stickler for engineering and science. This is actually referred to as a centrifugal turn, not really a gravity turn. However, I'm not all that picky, so we're going to call this a gravity turn anyways. Okay, here we go. And oops. Our spin is a little bit much here, which is kind of curious because most of the time when you build something out of 1.25 meter parts and you don't have really high part counts, the vehicles tend to be relatively stable. In this case, we're starting to get we got a little bit of that wobble factor going on, and part of it is coming from the fact that this top of the vehicle is attached via struts and attached via that docking node. It isn't really attached via decoupler. And also not to mention that these outboard engines aren't attached to the center board, the main body of the vehicle, via struts. But, you know, that's okay. Let's switch on over to our orbital speed, and looks like we have a really healthy speed, so looks like we're really going to make it this time. Just imagine having colonies on other planets with like population of 50 Kerbals or more in each. You can do that with larger parts, absolutely. However, what you guys are going to discover in the Minimalist Space Program is using 1.25 meter parts kind of limits you in the number of Kerbals you can send into space, and that's intentional. And we are intentionally going to limit the number of Kerbals we can send at a time into space. As a matter of fact, you'll see that when we start sending up our habitat station. Each Kerbal is going to be a precious entity up there, and losing one Kerbal in the 1.25 meter space program is going to be a larger detriment than, say, if we were going to send somebody up in a traditional space program using ginormous parts. Speaking of which, I noticed there was a new mod that was released on curse.com, and it was the Kerbal colonization mod. And what that does is it allows you to build, it gives you the parts necessary, similar to the home mod. It's just a lot more realism based. It allows you the ability to build bases on other planets. I haven't tested it out yet. It probably isn't as intuitive as the home mod, but it does look really cool. I've downloaded the mod, and I might give it a test try on one of my save files. Okay, so we have just disengaged our outboard engines. We're healthy at 1,300 meters per second, which, had we been playing any other save file with standard parts, we'd already be at suborbital. However, we're not there yet. But we're getting awfully close, and we have plenty of Delta V left over. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for Miko at 75 kilometers instead. Okay, so 73, 74, 75, and Miko main engine cut off. Okay, and before I forget, we need to switch the icon for this guy to the station icon. Okay, so not too much time to lose. We're going to drop our nose to the horizon, and we're going to get ready to circularize our orbit. Lickety split. As you can see, our speed is dropping pretty quickly. So we're going to push ourselves to the horizon and engines to full. We're going to drop our nose a little bit more to stabilize ourselves a bit. We're going to see if we can hold our apoapsis at around 80 kilometers. There we go. Okay, and now we've got our orbital speed increasing. So everything's looking pretty good. Geezer suggests sending 51 Kerbal missions to the colony. We can definitely do that, absolutely. However, yes, it does require a little bit of patience to do that. But if you're using it, if you're doing it with 1.25 meter parts, you'll find these missions are going to be a little bit easier because the vehicles tend to be a little bit sturdier and less wobbly as a result. But still, 50 missions is nothing to shake a stick at. Okay, here we go. So we are at 80 kilometers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip my nose a little bit to stabilize the apoapsis. Remember, we're going to try to hit the 85 kilometer orbit. So we need to circularize it at 85 kilometers. However, the suborbital trajectory, we can leave it as open as we want. Because the point is, we need to make sure that we circularize the orbit before we start fine-tuning things to get this orbit properly at 85 kilometers. Okay, and we just hit past the 2 kilometers per second mark, so we're looking pretty good. Oh boy, apoapsis is getting away from us. I need to lift the nose a little bit. Oh boy, oh, I'm already at 85. Gosh darn it. Okay. So let me go ahead and lift my nose up. Remember, we want to hit at roughly 2,300 meters per second to circularize the orbit. And we are so close, we might as well just stay at MECO. I've already turned off the engine because our apoapsis is already at 85 kilometers. Let's go ahead and save real quick. And then we're going to turn on the lights. There we go. And what we're going to be doing is, well, okay, we're going to coast to the apoapsis. And then we'll go ahead and do our standard burn to circularize the orbit. Well, hi there, Tyler Goodman. What is up? Okay, so here we go. Let's scoot on over to the apoapsis. Okay, good. And we're going to drop our nose to the center line. Drop it down to the horizon. There we go. And let me target the MUN. Make sure that our plane is pretty respectable. Okay, and engines up. Okay, let's go ahead and zero this puppy out. Let's go ahead and circularize this orbit. Okay, so I need to drop my nose. That apoapsis is getting away from us. Okay, there we go. All right, so, oh, there's the periapsis. Let's see if we can get this as close as possible to what we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do little jets here and there. Zero our angle a little bit. Everything's looking good. We may be able to circularize this orbit as is right now. That would be really cool. And our fuel is doing amazing. As a matter of fact, we may be doing a little too well on the fuel because we haven't had to use our last stage. Okay, so 84, 85, we're getting awfully close. I'm going to drop my nose a little bit here. And there we go. Okay, 85.2, 85.4, perfect. Now all we got to do is zero out the planes. So let's go ahead and zoom on over. Let's go ahead and save real quick. And we're going to be hitting the ascending node. So that means we're going to have to turn our vehicle south in order to zero out the planes. Now, as you can see, the only thing that's supplying power to the station are those two really tiny solar panels. Now, there's always the option that we could use radiothermal generators. However, I use radiothermal generators in my spacecraft as a last resort. Something about sending nuclear material into space, especially in a space station, can be a little bit unnerving, especially if you need to send a spacecraft back home to Kerbal to burn up in the atmosphere. And I'm pretty sure the Kerbals wouldn't appreciate radiating the atmosphere there. So we're going to try to stick to solar panels whenever possible. Okay, so here we go. And approaching the ascending node. As soon as we approach the ascending node, we're going to go ahead and zero out the plane. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn our vehicle southward. Ooh, okay. There we go. Our vehicle is now south. And let's zero this out. Throttle up. And we are zeroed. Good. So the plane is zeroed out. We're gonna turn our space station again to the north. There we go. Now remember, when you send permanent objects that are going to be orbiting celestial bodies, say space stations or satellites, or any object in general that you plan to be docking repeatedly in the future, it's always a good idea to orient your station either facing north or facing south. What that does for you is it keeps the station it keeps the station or satellite and whatnot oriented generally in the same direction. Now, what's going to happen is as a result of orbital mechanics, this station is going to be spinning in a certain direction, but it's going to be spinning along its radial axis. It won't be spinning along its major axis. So it should allow you the ability, for example, like this station here, there's a docking port at the bottom and there's a docking port at the top. Because this station is oriented facing northward, what's going to happen is this station will always have a docking port facing north and will always have a docking port facing south. So when you have a vehicle that's going to come up and going to dock with the station, you don't have to guesstimate where those docking ports are because it's always going to be in a predictable location. Okay, and now that we have set our station, we can go ahead and decouple this and we can send this lifting body back home to Kerbal. Now, keep in mind that we didn't use any standard decouplers here. We used just a docking port to attach to this station. And there's a reason why. If I had used a regular decoupler here, like the decoupler down here, and here, let me go ahead and show you real quick. So I'm going to quick save, and then we're going to remove, because this station is already where it needs to be. It's at 85 kilometer altitude on both the periapsis and the apoapsis, so it looks good. The planes are good. So this is in the perfect location where it is. So we're just going to decouple this now. And watch this. This station is now by itself. And what we're going to do is we're going to deorbit this bottom part here. The reason why I used a docking port, I attached this via docking port rather than via decoupler, is because a docking port doesn't have a whole lot of repulsion forces. A decoupler does. And what would happen is if I had used a regular decoupler, the repulsion force of disconnecting the lifting body from the station would have caused the space station to accidentally alter the apoapsis and periapsis, its orbit generally. In this case, since it's facing north and south, the repulsive forces would have pushed the station northward and would have altered its plane, and we wouldn't have had a zeroed out plane anymore. So that's one of those things you just got to watch out for. Does it affect the mission a whole lot? Not really. But if you're a stickler for the details like I am, it's pretty important that we watch out for stuff like that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to deorbit this guy because, guess what? We aren't big fans of Kessler syndrome, right? We don't want to leave debris hanging around in space to smash into other vehicles. So what we're going to do is we're going to deorbit this buddy here. Okay, and switching around to 270 degrees. And I'm going to give this a short engine burst, and then I'm going to drift a little bit away from the station. Remember, you don't want to give a giant engine burst and just jet away all willy-nilly when you're so close to the station, because you always stand the chance that the wash from your engine might accidentally damage your station as you pull away. Okay, and now that we are an adequate distance away from the station, we jet away. And watch as our periapse drops, and perfect, Miko. Let's go and switch over to our regular station here. Okay, so our KRV station. Ooh, let's see here. Our KRV station looks good, zeroed out. Our apoapsis and periapse are still good. Now, as you can see, the apoapsis and periapse has changed by roughly 200 meters, but that's okay. That's something that we can still work with. So now our station is ready to go, and it is ready to bring some Kerbals back down to Kerbin. So we're good. So we have our first station in orbit. Look at that beautiful guy. Let's go and take a look and double check, see what our part count is. And the part count is only 34. So we're still keeping part counts low, and it is a piddling 7.15 tons. Really small. However, it's fairly medium weight when you consider in terms of 1.25 meter part size here. Perfect. Okay, so now that we've got that squared away, let's go ahead and head back to the Space Center. Okay, so now that we are back in the Space Center, what we're going to be doing next is, well, let me double check, make sure everything that we need to have, is currently in orbit. Okay, so yes, and yes. Okay, so currently we now have our KRV station, our Kerbal Return Vehicle Station, so we can bring Kerbals back down the Kerbin. And we have our manned space tug, which is attached to our orbital fuel tank. So we have fuel in space in addition to a tug. So everything is looking good so far. Okay, and coming back to the VAB, what we're going to be doing next is we're going to be attempting a landing on Minimalist. Our first celestial body that we're going to be establishing a space presence on is Minimalist, and it's a really good starter place to go to, especially for people who are just learning to play this game and they want to land on their first celestial body. It can be really tempting to go to the Mun first. However, believe it or not, it takes more Delta V to go to the Mun and back than it does to go to Minimalist and back. And because of Minimalist's low gravity, it's a really great practice. It's a really great celestial body to do your practice landings on. So let's go ahead and switch to our little Apollo craft. Now this is going to be our Minimalist Apollo craft. It's not completely finished yet, and we still need to finish the lifting vehicle. Now if you look at this, you'll notice something very curious about this one, in that it is not using a standard engine, but rather the top engine with which to land with is using an ion engine. No doubt, if for some of you guys that have been watching this channel for a while, you've probably seen me do the Ion Lander Challenge hard mode. And that was during the earlier version of Kerbal Space Program, Kerbal Space Program .22, and that was when the ion engines had a thrust capability of 0.5 kilonewtons. However, the new 23.5 patch has upgraded these ion engines, and they now are 4 times more powerful, with an amazing 2 kilonewtons of thrust. And as and we're going to be doing a little bit of an experiment here, and we're going to test to make sure that this vehicle can not only can it land on Minimalist using ion engines, but can it take off and go back into orbit using an ion engine. Okay. Now, unfortunately, the downside of me using this ion engine is going to increase the part count slightly. However, you know, it's all in the name of science, right? Okay. Now, this is going to be a semi-Apollo design. And what that means is that there's going to be a command module, there's going to be a landing module, and then there's going to be a return module. This is the return module. But there's only going to be one crewed module, and it's going to be this top one up here. This is the landing module, right? And what's going to happen is that when we're done with this piece here, we're going to eject it away, and then we're going to use this crewed module to attach itself to the return module, and it's going to come back to Kerbal that way. Okay? Now we need to finish this rocket here, so what we're going to do is we're going to do the standard regular. We're going to be putting some outboard engines with some good old-fashioned asparagus staging. So let's go and put this here. Let's see, I was reading that ions in KSP are super mega OP because in real life a burn takes up to 2 weeks to do. Yes, you are absolutely right, Freak. Ion engines in real life take a long time. And you're right, they do take weeks to accelerate a vehicle. Sometimes they just turn it on and leave it on for, who knows, about a month or so. And just about, however, everything in Kerbal Space Program is generally overpowered, and that's on purpose. I'm sure some people have the patience to play a real life space simulation game, i.e. Orbiter, and all its amazing complexity. However, you gotta have some playability in a video game, especially like Kerbal Space Program, so some things you just gotta exaggerate a little bit, right? Okay, so we're going to put in these bigger engines here. Okay. And we're going to have our fuel nozzle, and we're going to attach fuel lines directly into the center. Okay. As is, when I released this vehicle by itself, the lander portion of this vehicle has a thrust-to-weight ratio of 1.5. So, that should be more than enough to land this vehicle. But, considering the battery power available, these solar panels will not generate enough electricity to counter the energy drainage that this ion engine is going to be using. Most of it is going to rely on the amount of battery power that we have stored. And generally, there's about 2,500 units of electrical power stored in this vehicle, and hopefully that's going to be enough. If not, we'll stutter the launch. We'll stutter the engines when we launch from Minimalist. Okay, so let's go and finish this here, and drop this puppy down here. Okay. Now, hopefully, this is going to be enough to take us to Minimalist. And I think it will. But just in case, just in case, I know Scott Manley can do a minimalist Minimalist launch with part counts a lot smaller than this. As a matter of fact, he did this without asparagus staging. He did this with just one rocket and 2 outboard engines. However, he's been playing this game a lot longer than I have. And unfortunately, I don't have anywhere near the skill that he has. But he can play the game with almost no margin for error. Unfortunately, I make a lot of errors, so I gotta have some spare fuel just in case. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing that we did with the launch of the KRV system. Okay. And let me go ahead and attach these decouplers to these engines. And one more decoupler. One more. Actually, let's go ahead and attach on those SRBs early here. So we're going to use our good old-fashioned tiny SRBs. Come on, buddy. Come on. You can do it. There we go. There we go. And one more SRB. So let's grab this decoupler and attach it to the centerboard engine. Okay. And this guy, we need to drop it down here. All right. We are getting ready for our very first Minimalist launch. Whoo boy. Okay. Here we go. So I believe Bill is next in line. Yep. Okay, Bill. This is all you. Let's get ready to send you to Minimalist. Okay, and to the launch pad. Okay, Bill, you're about to make history. You are going to be only the second Kerbal ever to have the honor of going into space. And since Jebediah is the first one into space, and poor Jebediah, he's been in space for quite some time, hanging out in his tiny little space tug, without so much as a habitat station to go to. But we'll get to him in a little bit there. All right, Bill, here we go. Getting ready to launch in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and launch. Here we go. Going off into space. Okay, and we should be faring a little bit better. Overall, this vehicle should be lighter than the KRV station. Hopefully, a lot lighter. Okay, and we should be disconnecting our SRBs when we hit about 1,500 meters in altitude. Doing pretty good here. Okay, and disconnecting SRBs. Okay, and we are looking good. Alright, so we're fast approaching 150 meters per second. Altitude is approaching 5 kilometers, so we're looking good there. Okay, good. So we just passed 150 meter per second mark. Okay, so I may have to start throttling back soon here because we are approaching terminal velocity. And of course, terminal velocity is about 200 meters per second. So we're going to slow ourselves down a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and boost up after we pass the 10 kilometer per second mark. Oh, we don't want to drop speed. There we go. So we'll increase our throttle just a little bit. There we are, and we are approaching 10 kilometers. So time to turn. Time to move into our gravity turn and throttle up, moving in at 45 degrees. Perfect. There we are. Okay, slightly overextended, but we're doing okay. And dropping our first stage. Beautiful. We just barely dropped our first stage, and we are past the 10 kilometer mark. That is a good sign. Okay, and let's switch over to our orbital speed. That means we're going to have plenty of delta V to work with. Also, okay, as we minimalists, just ignore our talks together. We're siblings, and we joke together a lot. That's all right. No worries. Sibling... your conversation has no detriment to the mission. However, any positive, helpful advice is certainly appreciated as well. Okay, so looks like we're going to approach 700 meters per second. Looking good, just passing 20 kilometers. Let's go and take a look at the map here. Okay, we're looking pretty good, actually. All right, we'll be hitting that magic 13 to 1500 meter mark pretty soon. Okay, here we go. And we're almost at 1 kilometer per second. And mark, we just passed a 1 kilometer per second mark. Okay, perfect. So we are almost at suborbital. Ooh, we're doing really good here. Okay, approaching 1300 meters per second, and mark. Our apoapse is at 50 kilometers. Let's see if we can push that apoapse to 80 kilometers. We'll see about stabilizing our orbit at around 80 kilometers. We really don't need much more than that. As a matter of fact, we could probably stabilize our orbit around 75 kilometers. So let's go and take a look at that there. Yep, there it is. So orbit is starting to, apoapse is starting to increase exponentially. So let's get it. Oh, perfect. 76 kilometers is perfect. So we have MECO, main engine cut off. Let's go ahead and drop our nose. Okay. And our nose is dropped. There we go. Okay. And throttle up. Okay, and there we go. And we should be getting ready to drop our second stage any moment. There we go. Second stage. Away. Okay. And now our next milestone is reaching at about 2300 meters per second to zero out our orbits. We're going to dip our nose a little bit here. What we want to do is that we want to stabilize our orbit at around 80 kilometers. So let's keep our apoapse roughly around 80 kilometers then. Here we go. Okay, looking good. Approaching 1900 meters per second. Oh boy, I need to drop my nose again. That apoapse is getting away from me here. Okay, and we're probably going to just hit MECO at some point. Let's lift our nose again. There we go. I guess we're going to stabilize at about 85 kilometers. Okay. There we go. Let's have a look-see at our Apollo vehicle. Fuel is looking good. Looks like we're going to have plenty of fuel to do our Trans-Minimalist burn. Okay, now we just need to hit 70-kilometer altitude so I can start doing our time warp here. Here we go. And let's go ahead and open up our solar panels. Perfect. Okay, so here we go. And time warp time. There we go. And now that we have approached our Apple apps, let's go ahead and begin our circularization burn. Throttle up to 100%. And let's close up this orbit. Okay, things are running pretty smoothly so far. So fingers crossed, guys. So far Murphy hasn't hit us yet. Okay, and there's our periapse. Let's drop our nose to draw our Apple apps closer to us. Miko, look at that. Okay, beautiful. It doesn't. Now the orbit doesn't have to be perfect. After all, we're not going to be staying in orbit for very long. So, what we're going to do from here is now we need to start angling our plane to match Minimalist. So let's see here. Let's go ahead and head on over to our ascending node. And from our ascending node, we'll go ahead and turn our vehicle south so that we can zero out our planes with Minimalist. If I remember right, yeah. Actually, I'm surprised that Minimalist has a fairly circular orbit. I've always considered Minimalist to be like some sort of captured asteroid or something. And usually, if it's a captured asteroid of sorts, it has a fairly erratic orbit. But this one seems to be pretty stable, fairly circular too. Okay, so we're going to turn ourselves to southward to 180 degrees to match our planes and throttle up. This one's going to be a little bit sloppy here. As a matter of fact, I may... Oh boy, talk about sloppy. This is going to be pretty ugly. My vehicle is careening all over the place. Okay. Here we go. And we're below 1 degree. Come on, buddy. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Okay, so we're going to have to head on over to the declination mode here. Declination node. And I'm going to have to turn myself northward to finish zeroing out this plane here. Here we go. And as you can see, this orbit isn't very circularized. 91 kilometers on the Apple app, 78 on the Perry apps. So it's looking kind of ugly. But that's okay because, you know what? We aren't going to be in orbit around this planet for very long. Okay, here we go. So let's go ahead and change us northward so we can finish zeroing out the planes. Okay, and ooh, we just missed our turn here. Come on. Let's see if we can correct this here. We overshot. There we go. Okay, and let's zero ourselves out here. Perfect. And let's head on toward our node until we're almost on top of it. And let's go ahead and burn a little bit more. There we go. NAN doesn't get much closer to that, right? NAN usually means not a number, which means the game can't, because it's so close to it being zeroed out. It can't really divide by 0, you know, all that fun stuff, which means it just marks it as not a number, which means this is as close as you're going to get to a perfect plane angle here. Okay, so if you capture an asteroid, you can make your ideal Minimalist and personalize it. Give it a hat. Yes, I'm sure we can. Actually, that's a great idea. We should also start building our Minimalist asteroid base as well at some point. Okay, so now that we are in orbit, let's go ahead and, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this, but we're going to be using a maneuver node to begin our interception with Minimalist. So let's go ahead and do that. So maneuver node up. There we go. And usually the delta V required to head to Minimalist is around 900 meters per second delta V. Heading to the Mun is about an 800 meter per second delta V change. Okay, so let's see here. We want to be able to orbit the Minimalist counterclockwise. This current trajectory will have us orbiting Minimalist clockwise. So let's see if we can fix that a little bit. Come on, come on. Come on. There we go. Okay, so let's take a look here. And we have... Perfect. Okay, so we will be orbiting Minimalist counterclockwise. Perfecto. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn our vehicle. It's a 52-second burn. Pretty respectable. And I think we have enough fuel for that, too. As a matter of fact, we may have more than enough fuel to do this. Give it a fedora hat. Actually, we could probably, I imagine if we give Zestu the idea, he probably wouldn't have a problem catching an asteroid and then landing a hat-shaped spacecraft on top of the asteroid. That would be pretty funny, wouldn't it? Okay, here we go. So we have 8 minutes till we approach our maneuver node. Let's go ahead and zoom toward it. All right. Now, a good rule of thumb when messing around with burning into maneuver nodes is generally you want to split the maneuver node in half. So considering that our estimated burn is going to be 52 seconds, you'll generally want to start your burn about 26 seconds before you approach the maneuver node. And that way you can even out the burn before and after the node. However, I'm going to start it roughly at about 28 seconds. And that takes into account the fact that I'm throttling up my spacecraft. Unfortunately, there's no button that you can press that puts your spacecraft to immediately 100% thrust. It would be kind of neat, though, if we had a macro that could do that. Okay, and getting ready for burn and throttle up. Here we go. Okay, and burning 40 seconds. Ooh, we may have accidentally underburned. Started a little bit too late, but that's okay. Okay, and looking good. Let's go and take a look at our spacecraft here. Okay, fuel in this stage is looking pretty decent. And Bill looking as stoic as ever, staring out into the black nothingness. Look at that proud face of his. That man does that Kerbal does not know the meaning of fear. Okay, we're almost done with the burn. Go, and 4 seconds more to go. Alright, so this is the big one here. This is make or break time. Mark. Okay. All right, we are good. Okay, and let's go ahead and begin the drift. Now, when this mission is done, we're going to, I imagine, if, some people might imagine it would be a good idea to, when it's time for the spacecraft to come back to Kerbin, to dock with the KRV station and then use the pods off the KRV station to return back to Kerbin. However, you need a lot more delta V you need a lot more delta V coming from a celestial body like that. To do that, because coming back from a celestial body like Minimalist or the Mun means that you're coming in at a steep angle coming in towards Kerbin, and you have to waste a delta V to circularize the orbit around Kerbin to head in to the KRV station. Usually you can save delta V just by falling into Kerbin directly out from Minimalist and then just unloading your parachutes off of your vehicle from there. And that's what we're going to be doing here. Okay, and speed time up again. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is, let me take a look real quick. See what we got going on. Okay, I'm going to do a quick reload. I just did a quick save, so I'm going to do a quick load here. One thing I noticed about this game is that if you do a quick save and then a quick load, as you're leaving Kerbin, it resets a lot of the mechanics of the game in such a way where it helps the game run a little bit smoother. Especially if you're running on a lower end computer, you start to really notice the difference. And so my suggestion would be, as soon as you leave Kerbin, in such a way where it's sufficiently away, just do a quick save and then do a quick load, and then all of a sudden you'll see a noticeable difference in the amount of increased frame rates. So I imagine that's just a thing with the Unity engine and whatnot, but it's a neat little trick actually. Okay, so our periaps is going to be about 300 kilometers. That is an easy fix. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn our spacecraft to 270 degrees. Whoops. Did I say 270? I mean, we're going to turn our spacecraft to 90 degrees. Okay, so let's go and turn ourselves to 90. And let's go ahead and zero ourselves out. There we go. Okay, and actually, let's go ahead and push our periaps until it's 0. There we go. So that we're falling into Minimalist, and then we'll go ahead and make our fine-tune adjustments once we get into Minimalist's sphere of influence. So here we go. Let's see, Freak, thanks for the tip there, since my computer isn't the best. Yeah, absolutely. Playing this game off of this computer, this office computer, I've learned a lot of interesting tricks on how to make the game more efficient for you that I have not learned playing off of more powerful rigs. So playing this game off of this less than spectacular computer has taught me some really neat techniques. And I'm glad I could help there. Okay, so here we go. We're moving into Sphere of Influence. Zipping in. Perfect. Okay. So, looks like we're looking pretty decent here. What we're going to do is we're going to attempt to do some sort of plane change burn that will allow us to do an equatorial orbit. One of the challenging parts about approaching Minimalist is that you always approach Minimalist at an angle. And it can be a challenge sometimes to bring this vehicle into an equatorial orbit because you don't have a reference to do your equatorial orbit by. Unlike when you're flying from Kerbin and orbiting Kerbin, you can use the Mun as a reference to equatorialize your orbit. Because the Mun is at a near equatorial orbit to Kerbin. However, there's no frame of reference that you can use here on Minimalist, so you just have to guesstimate, really. Okay, so we're going to drop our orbit just a little bit, and then we're going to turn our vehicle to 90 degrees so that we can lift. There it is. So that we can lift our apoaps. Okay, here we go. So turn us to 90 degrees and then burn again. What we're going to aim for is, let's shoot for roughly a 20. Actually, that's good right there. Let's see if we can shoot for a 15-kilometer orbit. Because we're going to be landing on just ion engines, we want to make sure that we don't have to. We want to make sure that when we go into orbit, that it's going to be a low orbit that doesn't require as much delta V to intercept our Kerbin return vehicle. Okay, so let's switch over to 270 degrees. Let's drop ourselves down. Ooh, a little bit too much there. I wonder if that's going to work, but let's go ahead and equatorialize our plane here. So let's turn ourselves to 180 degrees. 180. Perfect. KSV Minimalist, what kind of system are you running on? For the purposes of this game, we are running this off of a standard office computer, which will force us to use minimalism and minimalist parts and 1.25 meter parts and blah, 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 blah. However, the specs on this computer is it's running off of a quad-core 2.3 gigahertz processor. And so it runs pretty decently off of 2.3 gigahertz, actually. I'm rather surprised. Okay, and there we go. I think that's about as close as we... Well, it's slightly south. If I'm going to be a stickler about this, I suppose I should turn us a little bit north and see if we can equatorialize this orbit a little bit more. Okay, and 315 degrees. We're going to turn us north at 0 degrees. Oh, I always overcorrect this stuff here. Come on. Turn us to north. There we go. And let's lift. Okay, that's about as... Well, let's lift a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so that looks kind of good, right? All right, so let's go and turn ourselves to 90 degrees. And we're going to lift our periapsis to, we're going to go to 15 kilometers. So we're going to tilt ourselves to 90 degrees. There we go. And 15 kilometers. There we go. Perfecto. Now what we do is we approach our periaps and then we're going to zero out this orbit. Not zero out. We're going to circularize this orbit. Okay, here we go. On approach. Okay. Looking good. I don't think we really need so much a maneuver node here, so I'm going to guesstimate this. So now, I may have waited a little bit too long, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and turn ourselves retrograde, and we're going to burn ourselves into Ooh, close to a circularized orbit. And mark, here we go. Now, when Scott Manley does his impromptu trips to Minmus, he doesn't really circularize his orbits. And he doesn't need to. And really, we don't need to either. However, I do find things a lot easier when I have a circularized orbit to work off of. So we're going to circularize this orbit. Okay, I know that this is kind of a waste of delta V to circularize an orbit like this, but you know, it looks nice and it looks prettier this way, and it makes interceptions of orbital vehicles a little bit easier and a little bit more predictable. Okay, so we're gonna try to circularize this orbit at 14 kilometers. Hopefully we're not too low, so we're going to save this real quick. And now we're going to swing around, and we're going to head on over to the Apoaps. Okay, here we go. Now, we're not in an exactly equatorial orbit. It still looks kind of funky this way. And if I want to go OCD on this, I suppose we can go ahead and make little course correction adjustments to fine-tune the planes to make it a little bit more equatorialized. So let's go and give this a try. We've got plenty of fuel to spare, so. But before we do that, let's fix our periapsis here, so it is at a steady 14 kilometers. And I am turning in the wrong direction. I need to turn us to 90 degrees. So let's do that. Okay, and oh so carefully. Here we go. And there we go. Little jets. Just little jets here. Perfect. There we are. All right, and then we're going to swing around to about here, and then we're going to fix our plane to make it somewhat equatorial. There we go. Generally, about one of the only ways to have an exactly equatorial orbit around Minmus, at least ones that I've found, is pretty much just to cheat and use hyper-edit. However, I don't think I've ever really used hyper-edit, if any. Hyper-edit's a lot of fun if you want to experiment with spacecraft in the game, and you can even edit the orbit of other planets. However, it does take away from the fun. Oh my gosh! I need to face south. I was burning in the wrong direction, and it screwed up the orbit even more. So let's go ahead and head back, see if we can repair this as quickly as possible. Okay. Hey, what would be the best way of getting completely equatorial orbit around a body when you have no reference points like the Mons orbit for Kerbal? So, unfortunately, there's no easy answer for that. I've never found an easy way to get a perfect equatorial orbit around a planet that doesn't have a good reference point, unfortunately. A lot of it is just guesstimation work. Like here. I just kind of tilt, like here. What I'm doing is I'm doing just some weird, awkward newbie kind of stuff, like tilting the camera in such a way so that the orbits appear in a straight line when I'm facing dead on to Minmus. And then I'll burn accordingly to zero it out until I don't see the other side of the orbit like this, right? As it is right now, it looks like a fairly equatorial orbit, and so we're just going to have to go with that. Yeah. Sorry about that, Freak. Unfortunately, there's no real answer I can give you for that. Maybe someone has cracked the code and was able to figure out a perfect equatorial orbit without a planetary reference. If they managed to do that, kudos to them. If anything, that's probably Scott Manley who's figured it out. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. Okay, here we go. So we're going to give this one more orbit, and then we're going to head on over to the apoapse because I'm a stickler like that, and we're going to circularize the orbit by lifting our periapse to 14 kilometers. Okay, and here we go, and we're going to see a nice, beautiful sunrise coming out of Minimalist. Just look at that. Simply amazing. And we still have tons and tons and tons of fuel with us. So we just got plenty to spare here. Okay, and approaching the apoapsis. Because we're doing really minute adjustments to the periapsis, we can start doing our burn when we're pretty much almost dead on to the apoapsis. Something like maybe 5 seconds to apoapsis, or T-minus 2 seconds to apoapsis. Here we go, and we're going to turn our vehicle to 90 degrees. Watch out for the little wobble here. Here we go, and burn away. Here we go. Perfect. 14.5 kilometers and 14.5 kilometers. We are looking good. Okay, now what we're going to be doing is, remember what I told you guys? If we're going to keep something in space that we intend to intercept at one point, it's always a good idea to face your vehicle either north or south, and that's what we're going to be doing. So we're going to face our return vehicle northward. Here, I generally always face my vehicle northward. There we are. And let's turn on our lights here, and that's not good. Our lights aren't going to do us a whole lot of good, are they? Okay, here we go. So, we're going to... Whew, okay, so this is the moment of truth, guys. Scott Manley doesn't need to figure out anything. He just automatically knows everything there is to know in KSP. You're absolutely right, Freak. Scott Manley, he just thinks it up, and it just happens. He is absolutely amazing when it comes to this game, and he just impresses me every time I see him play this game. However, he's not a terribly good analog if you want to play the game vanilla style, or if you want to play the game as it is. Like a lot of people, Scott Manley uses a ton of mods in his game. And so if you want to experience the game in its purest form without mods and whatnot, usually a really awesome guy that plays the game just vanilla style is Ad Hoc Gaming, Harv. He's a pretty awesome dude. And he provides a lot of inspiration for my Minimalist space program, because he uses absolutely no mods when he plays his game. Now, he does have a pretty big part count in a lot of his vehicles, but just the fact that he plays with no mods puts him in the minority of a lot of Kerbal space program players who fairly famous Kerbal space program players. Okay, so let's go ahead and zoom around Minimalist. And what we're going to do is, the purpose of this mission here, oops, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to change our current mission. Let's go ahead and fix that right now. Current mission. Our current mission is to set up, let's see here, land Apollo on Minimalist. There we go. Woo! Okay, can't believe I missed that detail. Now, when we land on Minimalist, we're going to have Bill set up a flag, and we're going to use that flag as a reference point for our future base. Okay, and Oh boy, we just have a lot of rocky areas. Actually, we'll probably choose the default flat area, which is going to be the ice lake in the middle of Minimalist. So that one's going to be a little while, actually, since we're in such a low orbit. What we may have to do is we may have to head back over to the Space Center so that we can do a faster time warp. Okay. Yeah, so that, because what we want to do is we want to land this vehicle in daylight. Having only an ion engine to land us means we need to have as much sunlight as possible. Actually, we may be able to do this now. Let's give this another orbit or two, and then we're going to give this another quick save. Actually, I'm pretty impressed with this orbit. This one is a pretty stable equatorial orbit around Minimalist, and I would be pretty tempted to leave this vehicle orbiting around Minimalist so that when I send future vehicles out there, I can use this vehicle as a reference point to equatorialize our orbit. But unfortunately, that won't be the case because we need to land this vehicle now. Okay, so our ice lake is now in sunlight, so we're looking really good. We can go ahead and start prepping ourselves for landing. We're actually going to give this one more orbit. So let's go ahead and zip us around so that we can land this vehicle maybe around noon-ish on Minimalist. Would this mission be technically called Minolo? Or would it be upon miss? Decisions. I haven't really considered that. Just call it. We could just call it Mission to Minimalist, I guess. Okay. Okay. So the ice lake is now generally around noontime on Minimalist, so we're good there. All right. So here's what we're going to do. All right, Bill. It is time for us to disconnect our vehicle and get ready for landing. So, whew, okay, fingers crossed, guys. Gonna do a quick save and decouple. Okay. Now check this out. We are now decoupled. Now what we have here right now is our landing module and our crew pod. If we take a look at the part count, only 21 parts. And if I had used just a regular engine without the ion engine, this would have been a lot less parts to work that we'd be working with. However, because we need lots of batteries, and then we also need the xenon gas, there's a little bit more parts than we need here. Also, if you notice, there's no landing legs on this vehicle. That's right. There are no landing legs here. And technically, we don't really need landing legs to land this vehicle, especially on Minimalist. And technically, we don't even need landing legs to land on the Mun. As long as you land softly enough, you're perfectly fine. So we are going to be landing this vehicle with just ion engine, and we're going to be using these batteries that are on the side to help us stabilize ourselves a little bit when we ultimately press ourselves into the ground. Okay, so let's go and activate our ion engine. Oh snap! Oh my gosh! I accidentally turned on my parachute, and I don't think there's any way to repack that parachute. Let me check here. Nope, no way to repack that parachute. Well then, okay, well that's all right. You know, the parachute won't activate till we hit an actual atmosphere. So we're still technically pretty good anyways. Okay, so here we go. Let's go ahead and scoot ourselves around to the other side. I am anticipating watching this lander land because I want to see the new ion engine thrust. Me too. I've made a couple ion landers in the past, landing on Gilly and on Minimalist, but I've never done it with the new updated, more powerful ion engines. My worry, however, is that because this ion engine is more powerful, it is going to suck a lot of energy. And my battery power may not be ready to handle that, but we'll see how that works. Okay. So we are turned retrograde. So let's go ahead and begin our burn. Now, because we're on the dark side, there's really no way for us to replenish our energy, but that's okay. Oh, look at that. Okay, so we drop our periaps pretty quickly here. Let's hope we don't hit any mountains or anything. Okay, and that's going to be close enough until we get closer to our landing zone. We want to land on this general area here, where the area is flat. What I love about Minmist is they have those frozen lake beds that are flat. On the Mun, your best bet is to head toward the center of a crater, and even then, you may or may not find absolute flat ground. So you're always taking that chance there. Okay. Here we go, and let's go ahead and bring the periaps down again. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so this orbital speed kind of worries me a little bit. In most cases, when you're planning to land on something like Minmus, you want to have your altitude be as low as possible. Yes, it is. Holy crap, it's like an actually usable engine now. It is. It's like the old style ant engine. The old style ant engine had a thrust of 1.5 kilonewtons. So this one is actually more powerful than the old style ant engine. Okay. So we are moving at 156 meters per second. We have a bit of a problem. We may not be able to slow down in time. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, we may have a little bit of a problem. But let's go ahead and zip on forward here. Okay. Woo! Okay, so we need to bleed off all this extra speed. So let's go ahead and thrust to full power. And let's see if we can drop our speed down as much as possible here. Okay, so oh boy, we're counting down the speed very slowly here. Yeah, 2 kilonewtons is a lot of engine power, especially for a vehicle this light, and especially for an ion engine. This vehicle weighs a paltry 1.76 tons. We may slow down this vehicle yet, actually. And our electrical power is draining very, very, very slowly, which gives us, man, okay. So I'm not liking the fact that we aren't going to make it to the ice lake. So I need to stretch ourselves a little bit further here. As a matter of fact, we do need to slow down quite a bit. So I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna switch over to surface mode, and what we're gonna do is we're going to land wherever fate takes us. And then we're going to do our grasshopper hops toward the ice lake. Okay, here we go. So our speed is at 75 meters per second. We're looking really, really good here. We're starting to come down pretty fast, though. I wish there was some way I could keep track of radar altitude beyond 2,500 meters. But let's go and take a look at IVA mode. Okay, so we're still well above 25. We're still well above 2 kilometers on radar altitude, so we're looking okay. Okay, here we go. And yeah, we're doing fine. We're gonna make it down just fine here. As a matter of fact, Bill's feeling happy about this too. Just look at that smile. He's got that confident smile going on. He's loving this. Okay, as a matter of fact, we may be slowing down too much here. So what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and zero out our lateral velocity. So we're almost zeroed out on lateral velocity. Electrical power is good. Xenon gas is good. And even if we ran out of electrical power, we have the capability with our solar panels. We can just MECO out, main engine cut off our ion engine, and we could just let our solar panels regenerate our power pretty quickly. Okay, and we still got a little bit of lateral velocity going on, so we're going to push our retrograde indicator toward the center. There we go. Okay, now we're just going straight down. Let's see how fast we can go. Oh, we are below 3,000 meters. So we are doing pretty good. And it's noon. You know how I can tell it's noon? It's because our solar panels are facing straight up and down. So that means the sun is almost right above us. And there is our Apollo return probe there. Minimalist probe. Okay, here we go. So we're coming down at a pretty brisk pace. Well, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Okay, so let's go ahead and go to half thrust. Let's see. Yes, we are approaching 500 meters on radar altitude. So we need to drop our speed fast. So let's full throttle. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I may have waited too long on this one here. 17. 18. Oh, dear me. Oh, dear me. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Crap, 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 crap. Oh, boy. Here we go. We're coming down way too fast here. Ah. Well, that didn't work out so hot, did it? We're on the ground, aren't we? Yep, we certainly are. My goodness. Okay, so the ion engine worked. Sort of. This was human error. The ion engine would have worked spectacularly, actually, if it wasn't for me screwing this up. My gosh. I will leave this up to you guys if you want me to reload this and give this another try, but I think it's already saved. Or we can leave Bill to his fate and we can send a rescue mission over to him. Wow. But overall, he's made it to the ground. And while we're at it, I guess we could just have Bill pop on out and plant the flag. Okay, so let's go ahead and head on out, and let's go and have him plant a flag, I guess. So, flag planting. Plant flag. And this will not... This could be... These hills are way too off. Okay. So, the consensus is we send a rescue mission. Alright. Our first... Let's see here. Our first Minimalist landing. That ion engine was awesome until it went boom. Okay. All right. So, Bill, you're just going to have to hang around here, buddy, until we can send a rescue mission. So, back into the little pod you go. Whee! Oh, crap. Oh, he went ragdoll on me, and I have... Wait. Come on. There we go. Whew. I was going to lose him there for a second. So let's go and bring you back down. And let's get you back into the pod. Oh. Okay, so I think it's safe to say that the new ion engine works really well. As a matter of fact, believe it or not, in a previous ion engine landing video that I did here, there were 4 ion engines I had to use. In this one, this vehicle only has 1 ion engine. And it is also roughly the same weight as the probe that I sent in that video. So this is a really efficient engine here. Okay. Careful. Don't hit those solar panels. Come on, buddy. Ugh, I've never had so much trouble trying to get into a spacecraft. There we go. Okay. And let's go and turn the lights on, too. All right, Bill. We're going to send you a rescue mission for you later. So hang tight there, buddy, okay? Till then, let's head on over to the Space Center. Okay, so we're at the Space Center, and let's go ahead and get the sun to a little higher up there. Okay, so we still have another space station we need to get into orbit, and we need to get that squared away. We want to develop a living presence in orbit. A chance for our Kerbals to live up there semi-permanently. So what we're going to do is we're going to send our habitat station up there. Finally, a place for our Kerbals to live. Now, this is going to be probably our biggest object we're sending into up there yet. And as a habitat station, this will also serve as a minor fuel depot too. Now, sending Kerbins to live in space means that we need to have adequate living space for our Kerbals. So the general rule of thumb, especially one that Scott Manley follows sometimes, is that you want to have 4 living pods for every 1 Kerbin that you plan to live up there in space, especially if you're planning to go to Duna. Same rule generally applies here. If we're going to have a station with 2 Kerbals in it that's going to be living up there permanently, you need to have around 3 to 4 command pods per Kerbal. And so this station here has 9 command pods, which means that this station can comfortably sit 2 Kerbals, and if we really, really stretch it, comfortably sit 3 Kerbals. Now, in some cases, you know, I mean, other people, they'll just willy-nilly like fill up every single one of these tiny pods with Kerbals and them all into space. However, I wouldn't want to sit inside a single command seat for months at a time. It would certainly drive me crazy, and I imagine it would drive you crazy. At the same time, we should consider the comfort of our Kerbals. Now, you notice this tank is empty, and it's empty on purpose. Because if this tank was full, we would have a lot of problems sending this vehicle up into space. So let's go and launch this here. What we're going to do is this vehicle is going to have a standard orbit about it. Let's see, KRV station. The tug is at 110. So we're going to launch this station and send this to orbit at about 110 kilometers. Now, this station has 2 docking ports and 2 solar panels. And as you can see, it's fairly rudimentary too, especially for a habitat station. And also, I need to change the text on here. We'll change the text in a little bit here. Okay, approaching altitude of 1.5 kilometers, 1.7, approaching 2 kilometers, and mark. This is probably the heaviest lifting engine I've sent yet into space. There we go. You see how those outboard engines just drop, explode away from the craft without the use of separatrons? That's the really neat part about not using struts here, especially if you have all these outboard engines in so close proximity to each other. Okay, so let me go ahead and reset our current mission here. And we're going to say launch the habitat station. Now, there's going to be maybe about 2 more stations that we're going to be sending up. Okay, and control from here. And those other stations, again, are going to have very specific roles. The next station we'll probably send up is probably going to be the transit station. And what a transit station is, it's basically an airport in space. The less glamorous name for it would be a parking lot in space. A transit station normally receives all of the spacecraft. Most of the spacecraft that we send up there, i.e. fuel tankers, crew transfer modules, things like that. And it parks it there and serves as like the traffic control station for all of the vehicles that we send up there in orbit. Okay, so we're going to tilt our vehicle at 45 degrees. Here we go. And then we're going to go into orbit mode. Perfect, and everything's looking pretty healthy. So we'll get this thing into orbit yet. So lights on. Yo, and we are approaching 0.5 kilometer per second. Okay, so this one is going to be one of our more robust launches. As a matter of fact, it is a little bit uncontrollable, a little bit tougher to control. It tends to veer away off the markers that I try to put it on, which is weird because normally I only get instability issues messing around with 2.5 meter parts. 1.25 meter parts tend to behave themselves. I guess this is one of those exceptions. Okay, we're approaching 700 meters per second. Nice, healthy launch. As you can see, we have our struts sticking out here with our batteries, and also these struts attaching to the space station to keep it stable while we're flying into orbit. Because, guess what? Same thing as before, we don't have a decoupler. We just have a docking port attaching the space station to the main lifter. Okay, that's a really good idea, to have one spot where all new modules go until they either continue on their merry way or until you can find an exact spot in your station for them. Yeah, absolutely. Transit stations also serve as a neat way to store your modules and whatnot that you plan to eventually use on other stations and things like that. You just have to be, if you plan to use really specific stations for everything, just be ready to do a lot of rendezvousing and docking. Which actually is the point of this game. And the more rendezvousing and docking you do, the better experience you have with this game. So it just makes it a lot more fun overall anyways. Okay, so we are approaching suborbital speed. Let's go and take a look and see what we have here. Okay, so we're looking pretty decent. Steady at Apple Apps is approaching 50 kilometers. We still need more speed though. Come on, buddy. I know you can do it. Okay, we're starting to run out of fuel here. I think we're doing pretty good though. We're at 1500 meters per second. Again, we want to make sure we're going to probably circularize the orbit of this habitat station at about 110 kilometers. So that would make 3 stations that we have in orbit. I might consider putting like a polar station around an orbit around Kerbal. Actually, one that that orbits perpendicular to the equatorial stations. We'll see. So let's go and drop. Whoop. I'm dropping our last side engines, and we are on our last stage, it looks like. Okay, and we have suborbital. Let's go ahead and drop. We're going to drop our nose to the horizon. Okay, and even though we have our Apple Apps at 104 kilometers, we're still not quite in space yet. So we gotta wait until we are at least 70 kilometers, so that we can start time warping. Of course, probably a good idea to start opening up our solar panels. So let's go and open up our solar panels here. There we go, panel 1 and panel 2. Okay, and we can now begin time warping. Perfect. Okay, and now let's go and begin our burn circularization, burn orbital insertion burn. Oh boy, we lost a lot of speed reaching that Apple Apps. So we need to start speeding up. Lickety split. We need roughly about 800 meters per second delta V more in order to circularize this orbit. So let's speed up as fast as we can here. Okay, approaching 1700 meters per second. We're going to lift our nose up just a little bit here so we can start pushing our Apple Apps away from us. Okay, approaching 1800 meters per second. And Mark, come on, buddy. Let's bring us to 2 kilometers per second here. Hey, why not make a geosynchronous space station above the Kerbal Space Center? That's also a good idea. But making a geostationary object in space is challenging on its own. But making it specifically over a specific object can make things a little bit more challenging. But that doesn't mean that we won't give it a try. Certainly, we'll go ahead and we might be doing it sometime in the future. However, we certainly do have a lot of other missions ahead of us. For example, I believe we have a stranded Kerbal on Minimalist that we need to rescue. Okay, look at that too. Our plane is zeroed out on launch. You don't see that every day. Okay, so we still need to get into orbit here. Come on, guy. It looks like we got plenty of fuel too. So we're going to have a really good circularized orbit here. Okay, 107. I'm going to keep going until we get our Apple apps at 110 kilometers here. Because that is our aim. Perfect. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to zip around. And approaching our Apple apps, we're going to start hitting our circularization burn. And we really don't have much that we need to burn anyways. Our periapse is already at 104 kilometers, so this should be pretty cake actually. So circularization burn and now. And we're not even going to go full thrust here. We're just going to do this very carefully. And bring us nice and easy to 110 kilometers on the periapse. Perfect. And let's take a look. 110.2, 110.4 on the Apple apps. We are perfect. And look at that. Our planes are zeroed out too. Matter of fact, let me see if there's a way we can zero out the planes to NAN beyond zero. That'd be kind of neat. Here we go. Let's see if we can do an NAN plane change here. And let's head on over toward our ascending node. Okay, and slight burn. Whew. Okay, looks like we're not going to hit NAN. That's all right, though. So let's go ahead and turn our space station northward. Okay, and space station heading north. Perfect. Oh boy, it may have overshot it just a little bit. Let's go ahead and zero that out again. And now that we have perfected things up here, you'll notice too that we also have our Kerbal attachment system mod attached to this thing. So inside we have our pipe endpoints, we have our strut endpoints, and then we have our lighting here. Just in case we need to use it. The pipe endpoints are going to be used in case we need to ghetto dock something, and or transfer fuel without docking the vehicle. And of course the strut endpoints will be used for stabilizing things once we dock them, or if we ever decide to add extra modules to this. So we're going to do one more check. 110, 110, 0, and 0. We're looking good. And let's go ahead and get rid of this lifting module. So quick save and decouple. Okay, perfect. And now, let's go ahead and deorbit this vehicle. So we're going to give this a quick thrust. And we're going to turn this vehicle retrograde. There we go. And then we're going to hit a quick time warp here. Move away from the station. So we have proper clearance and thrust away. And deorbit this puppy. Look at that. We have tons and tons of fuel on this thing too. Okay, perfect. And now, switch views to our actual station. Let's check the part count. Look at that. Habitat station, only 23 parts. And it is 12.02 tons. Which if you've seen my Minimalist Space Station series, that's roughly the weight of my light space shuttle. Okay, and let's go and double check. Periapps is 110, Apple Apps is 110, and planes are zeroed out. This station is ready to be inhabited. Perfect. So we're going to give this a quick save. And now that we have hit the 2-hour mark, we are going to call this one a day. And we're going to continue this either in episodic format. I may do a recording and then post it on, or we may do another live stream in 2 weeks. Next weekend, I have a convention that I'll be attending. So, unfortunately, there won't be a live stream next week. But there will probably be a live stream after that. So, once again, I'd like to thank you guys for coming. And we will see you guys next time. I declare these missions mission complete. Thanks again, guys, for coming. And have fun and enjoy yourselves. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.